This session is titled Humane Learning and the Machine Age, Tapping History and the Classics for Technological Advice. So, that is this session. I don't see anyone leaving, so you all must be in the right place or deciding to stay. Wonderful. We are looking forward to hearing Josh Humane will be our presenter. Josh is a classical Lutheran educator. He also is a furniture maker and is currently a vicar at All Saints Lutheran Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Please welcome Mr. Humane.
All right, show me your phones. Wave them around. I'm serious. Let's see what you got. All right, you got one back there? Yes. All right. Josh, give me your address afterwards, and you can get my book for free that comes out on the top. Oh, you got one too. All right. Love it. I'm going to ask you to please turn them off or put them on silent and try to put them in a bag, not on your person. Okay. And I'm asking you to do that because research shows us. You can play it game if you want. You don't have to if you're adults. But in a classroom, this is what I did on the first day. We explained why we're going to not have our phones on our person or in our pockets, right, or in our bags. We're going to put them in pouches, right? I presented on that a couple years ago at CCLE in Fort Wayne, so I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. But research is continually showing that when a phone is in our pocket or in our sight, our attention span is reduced and our anxiety rises. Okay. And honestly, even if it's in the same room, okay, it's called brain work. Now, I'm not asking you to leave the room yet. So, just if you can, be fully present with me, okay, in this next hour. Turn them off or put them somewhere not on your person. Appreciate that. All right, so today we are getting into the topic of humane learning in the machine age. And as I said, a few years ago, I presented sort of on classroom management techniques in relation to phones and screens and so forth, so I'm not rehashing that. If you're interested in that, it's on the CCLE YouTube page from 2 years ago, where we looked sort of at the classroom management side. I do want to highlight a few things just in relation to recent research, best practices, and so forth, that I think are just important to rehash. And anytime I present on technology, I always like to sort of take a step back and sort of get behind the curtain, okay, and think more broadly about technology, what it does to us, and how to sort of have a framework for thinking about technology, no matter what it is, whether it's a calculator or a pencil or a car or a computer or a smartphone or AI, right? So we got to sort of take a step back first. Okay, so we're going to do that. We'll take a step back first part of the outline, and then we'll get into the second part of the outline, classroom strategies as far as curriculum goes, assessments when it comes to sort of AI proofing your assignments, what we could do to strengthen the curriculum to think about technological questions. A lot of it's already there. Spoiler alerts. We just need to access it and tap into what's already there in a lot of classes. So that's where we're headed. Just one more thing about your phones. Remember when you leave, I presented at Higher Things. Tyler was there, and on Christ versus AI and transhumanism at Concordia, Wisconsin, a few weeks ago. And I did the same thing with phones to tell them to, put them away, and some people left them in the room. Okay, so do remember your phone, yes. All right, so let's get into, first off, a few technological myths. So outline number 1.A. I want to talk a little bit about why the machine age classroom fails, and again, take a step back, get behind the curtain of technology, and think more broadly about these questions. So first I want to debunk a few technological myths. First off, I think one of the big technological myths that we all sort of imbibe culturally is that technology equals progress. Okay, technology equals progress. That is what I would call a technological myth. Okay, the assumption sort of going in our culture is just because we can do something technologically, we should do it, right? Just because we can do something technologically, we should. And that's a bad assumption. Right? So instead of saying technology equals progress, I think it's an accurate statement to say technology equals trade-offs. Okay? So we can change the technology equals progress myth to be accurate by saying technology equals trade-offs. All right? So let's just give a basic example. Let's use the car. Right? A car is a technology, right? A complex piece of technology. It entails all sorts of trade-offs, right? So give me a trade-off of the car. Something you get and something that's taken with the car.
My kids now live all over the country
Okay.
with my grandkids.
Right.
And they probably would have lived close to me without the car.
Okay, so the car allowed them to move away, right? And that's a trade-off. There's a pro and con there. A conference like this, right, benefits from the trade-off of the car, right, or the plane. All sorts of transportation technologies. But we lose out on that closeness as a family, and community, right? Josh, you ran up.
Same thing, just the close-knitness of community.
Yeah, right, yeah, and also in relation to churches, right? Before the car, the local church was really the center of the community, right? You could walk to church and so forth. The car drastically changed the landscape of American Christianity. Yeah.
Utilitarian landscapes.
Yeah, it also changed the physical landscape, right? The way we design cities, right? The way that interstates destroyed neighborhoods and cities and so forth, right? We really designed the landscape for the car, not for the human being. Right? Think of all the risk of walking nowadays, right? With all of the interstates and high-speed highways and so forth. Okay, take one more in relation to the car. Go ahead.
We rely on the government providing us oil, gasoline for these vehicles, rather than relying on God's providing grass for the horse. So we're relying on the government more than on God.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you get into all questions of government policy, right? What are they sort of supporting in relation to transportation and design of the environment and what it means to live in community? And then also, we think we're in control, right? That we don't have to rely on our own legs or the legs of an animal or a natural force like wind to get around, right? Now we are in control of the transportation. There's a reason that the train was called the Iron Horse, right? Because it didn't have to stop. You keep shoveling the coal in, right? So that's what I mean by technology entails trade-offs. So you can do that with any technology, okay? A very simple technology like a pencil, right? Like a book, like Plato did. We'll take a quote from Plato relating to the technology of writing, right? Trade-offs there. All that you can do with simple technologies all the way to very complex ones. All right? Make sense? Technology entails trade-offs. Okay? All right, let's move to the next myth then. Another common myth with technology is that technology is neutral. Okay? That it's not a technology that's bad, it's just a matter of how you use it, right? You've heard that, maybe you said that, right? I want to push back on that myth. I would rather say technology is a nudge. Okay, technology is a nudge. And we know this even with very simple technologies. Like, for example, take a hammer. Okay? When you have a hammer, finish it for me, everything looks like a man. Okay? In other words, having a hammer in your hand nudges you towards hammering. Okay? Now, it's not deterministic. It doesn't make you hammer. But it certainly nudges you towards the act of hammering. Because that tool, that technology, was designed by a human being for hammering. Right? So when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I can vouch for that. I have a shop at the house and make furniture. And some summers we host home ec and shop class summer camp for kids. We call it Closer to Home. And I give kids hammers. And when the week is over, and I go around my shop, I find dents places that they're not supposed to be dents. Because when they have the hammer, things look like a nail, right? Things look like a nail. So again, the hammer nudges you towards hammering. But nowadays, we don't just carry around a hammer. We don't carry around one-trick ponies. We carry around an omni-tool that can do anything you want. And by that I mean the digital device, the digital interface. But not only that, can it do anything you want, The other big difference between older mechanical technologies and digital technologies is that they can talk back. The hammer doesn't talk back to me and say, hey, I'm over here. I need you to use me to hammer this. No. But digital devices do talk back, don't they? And they are whispering to us all the time, trying to draw our attention away from what matters. Okay? So instead of technology is neutral, we need to realize that technology is nudging us. Okay? Now that's not to say I'm not arguing that technology is bad. I'm arguing that it's not neutral. Okay? And there is a difference there. What we do need to do is take a step back and realize, how is it nudging us? What is it nudging us towards? Okay? And many times, I would argue with digital technologies, we're being nudged in ways that lead us towards thinking we're autonomous, thinking we're in control, and also ways that are thinking that we are disembodied beings, that we're not a mind-body unity, but we are essentially minds on a stick, brains on a stick. Okay? And that's a problem. That's not a biblical view of the human person, to be a disembodied mind. Okay. So those are some important myths. Now, in relation to AI, I'm going to calling AI being intelligent, that's a myth. Okay. So AI is intelligent, that itself is a myth. So there's a myth inherent in what we call it. Okay. I'm going to use the term just because it's so common, but I think it's important to push back against the term artificial intelligence in general. Okay. I like machine learning a little bit better, but even the idea of learning is a human concept. Okay. So we do need to be careful with the language that we use. Again, for the sake of just moving along, I'm going to use AI. But we do need to push back against that idea that it's intelligent. Okay? And I'm just going to briefly explain why. Now, a lot has been written on why or why not we can categorize such a thing as machine learning as intelligent or not. Okay? And I'm going to try to boil this down into a few minutes so we get to the rest of the presentation in relation to education. But, shameless plug. If you are interested in reading more about sort of the philosophy of technology and so forth, I do have a book coming out about this topic and other topics in relation to technology. I just got the galley proofs this week, so it will be out soon. And I'm going to send around a good old-fashioned sheet of paper. If you're interested in getting notified, I'll do one per section here. When the book comes out, just put your name and email address if you're interested. Obviously, there's no pressure. And I'll just send an email out to a bunch of people when the book is out. It's called Are We All Cyborgs Now? Reclaiming Our Humanity from the Machine. It's a joint book project with an Eastern Orthodox thinker, Robin Phillips. And we really are looking at the question of technology in relation to education, church, politics, society, family, right? And how all this fleshes out, and what does it mean to live a Christian life in this environment. So if that's something you're interested in and struggling with, be looking for that book hopefully within the next month or two. And it's really a resource book. Each section of the book sort of stands alone as a resource. It certainly can be read straight through, but it is quite lengthy because we're dealing with so many topics. But the chapters stand alone. If it's just something you want to pick and choose, if you're just interested in the education side or the home side or whatever it might be. Okay, so why I say AI is not intelligent. First off, when we think of AI, what are most people thinking of today? ChatGPT or other large language models. Okay, so let's just briefly pull back the curtain on a large language model. Okay, a large language model basically is a massive amount of text, okay, human words that have been written by human beings that then are analyzed by a program, and then basically it is using algorithms to predict how to respond to certain prompts that are given to it by human beings. Okay. So in other words, it's a massive prediction machine. Okay, it's a massive mimicking machine, mimicking human patterns of language. Okay, let me give you an example to make this concrete. So the word apple in English. Okay, what's a common word that comes after apple? Core. Pie. Computer. Siege. Right, we could go on for a while. And some of those are more common than others. Okay, so what a large language model does, if the word apple, right, is in what it's supposed to say, right, then it's predicting what will come next based on what came before. And most of the time it's right, because the large language models are massive bodies of human text. Okay, we're talking about the text of the internet, right? Billions and billions of words. We're talking about books that have been digitized, right? Billions and billions of words. Okay, so it's going to be right most of the time. But there's a time when it's going to be wrong. Okay, just like sometimes the word after apple might be bees. Yeah, or a specific word that doesn't usually happen, right? So the mimicking machine is not always going to be right. Sometimes it'll be wrong. And sometimes it'll be drastically wrong. Recently, there was a story going around about Google's AI giving advice what to do when cheese is sliding off a pizza. What did it tell the prompter to do when cheese is sliding off a pizza? Did anybody see or hear this? Glue it on. Right? That's an example of where this falls apart. Okay, this is a prediction machine, a mimicking machine. Okay, now that's not to say it's not an amazing feat of human ingenuity and engineering, right? It is. But where does the intelligence lie? With the designer. Okay, with the human being who designed it and the human beings that prompted it, or behind the scenes, there are human beings that are constantly correcting large language models to help retrain them so they don't make mistakes. Okay, so there's human intelligence behind large language models. Okay, they're not conscious, they're not intelligent, they're not thinking, and they're really not learning. They're mimicking, and they're getting better at mimicking because humans are prompting them to get better at mimicking. Okay, does that make sense? Now again, that is simplifying a very complex process into a little bit of time. But I don't think it's an inaccurate view. And when I've presented or written on this before, I've asked people who have worked in this field, and they've said, yeah, that's basically how it works. Okay, and if we want to quibble after, we can, if some of you work in this field or know more about it than I do. Okay, but I think that is a fair representation. So instead of AI is intelligent, I think we could say AI is designed by intelligence. Right? Okay, and that is human being. Now, I'm just going to briefly address this because I've heard Christians argue that AI is demonic or demon-possessed. And I think, honestly, I'm open to being corrected, but I think that's sloppy. I think it's sloppy, lazy reasoning to say so. Here's why I say that. Just for the same reason we probably wouldn't say our car is demon-possessed. Okay, I think it's giving it too much credit. I think it's already humanizing it into a nefesh kaya, a living being. Okay, and I'm not an expert on demonology. Okay, but I think that demons tend to inhabit living beings. Maybe some of you pastors and theologians can correct me on that or think about it and get back to me. But I think they inhabit living beings. And just like, again, I would not say that my lawnmower was demon-possessed, even if I can't get it to start. I don't think I would want to say that AI is demon-possessed. Now, I think I know what people are getting at. And there are, Paul Kingsnorth has argued this. He's one of the, I think, the best thinkers on technology right now. He had an article in Touchstone called AI is Demonic. And we do engage with this argument a little bit in our book. But again, I think it's just going a little too far. I think it'd be more faithful to say that AI needs human beings to be influenced by demonic forces. Okay. So I would not say that the AI itself is inhabited by a demon, but perhaps it can become a portal for human beings to be led away by demonic forces. That's where I'm at right now. But again, I'm willing to be convinced otherwise. And again, in the book, we sort of look at both sides of that. That's sort of where we're at. But I will also say that historically, paganism has a very interesting connection to like technological dreams and hopes of transcendent humanity. There's a lot of fascinating stuff within paganism and technology that, again, that connection is like somewhere there, but I think it's a little too simplistic to just say AI is demonic. All right, we can move on. Think about that, and if you want to push back, do so in the Q&A. All right, so we've quickly went behind the curtain a little bit when it comes to technology. Those are 3 myths I think we need to push back on. Technology does not equal progress. It entails trade-offs. Technology is not neutral. It's nudging us, okay? And AI is not intelligent. It's designed by intelligence, okay? Now, when it comes to research in relation to the classroom and what to do about technology and so forth, just to save time, I'm going to say read this book, okay? If you've not seen or read this book yet, basically Jonathan Haidt puts together a lot of the research that's coming together now that's mounting in relation to the effect of screens and digital technologies on human beings, especially in relation to education, children, and teens, okay? So to save time, I'm just going to say, read this. He also has a Substack, After Babel, where he really has done this in serial form, little by little, okay? So you can get 3 parts of this if you don't want to read the whole thing. And he suggests, best practice-wise, that school should literally be phone-free, full stop, phone-free, okay? He doesn't mean like pouches at the door, which is what I did when I was in public school, which worked for my classroom. But what happened then when they were out in the hall and so forth was beyond my control. He means phone-free, you know, beginning of the day to the end of the day, all right? And there's various ways to do this. There's practical ways to do this. There's phone lockers. There's a company called Yonder that has phone bags that basically have a lock on them that when you come into the building, you put it in the pouch, you scan it, it locks, okay? When you come out of the building at the end of the day, you scan it again, it unlocks. And his argument is that it's not just the classroom time, it's also the in-between times that's important, okay? And I think that I was still in the classroom in the public schools during COVID. Not only did we have masks, we also had the phone problem. And it was literally just, it was like zombie land, okay? In the hallways to see before class, all the kids like this on their phones, right? Boom, 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 right down the hall waiting to come in the room. That was just so different from when I was in high school 20 years ago, or when you were in high school, right? There was noise in the hallway, right? And it was just like dead silence. Right? So it's not just the classroom time, Haidt argues. It's also the in-between times where we are learning those important skills of interacting with one another, face to face, taking the risks of talking to each other, looking each other in the eye, dealing with the awkward silences. All those things that require friction, okay? Human interaction has friction. The digital interface is frictionless on purpose, okay? And that weakens us as people over time if we are constantly being formed by the frictionless ease of devices and interactions that always are mediated by a screen. Okay? So that's Haidt's argument. Phone-free, full stop, beginning of the day to the end of the day. He also says more recess. He's a big fan of unstructured play, okay? Where kids are learning to navigate relationships, coming up with rules for games, right? And he has a lot of research he puts together on this as well. I think it's very important. And then his third thing is collective action. Collective action. Okay, maybe some of you and your families have tried things with phones and devices. Have you felt alone? I know I have. We've got two girls, 12 and 14, and they have no type of phone at all, right? And sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that's doing that. Okay. Anybody else feel that way with what you've done? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. This is, in some ways, he argues, a collective action problem, okay? If one person does this, it's very hard to be motivated and committed in the long term to do it, okay? But if a school, right, or a church or a local community decides together we're going to do this, then it's going to have more of a chance of success, and you're going to get the benefits. Because it's not just me without a phone, it's also everybody else without a phone, which means what? They need to look at me too. And I need to look at them. And we need to talk to each other. And we need to figure out a game to play at recess, right? All those types of things. So I think that is an important aspect of this as well. It is in some ways a collective action problem. So if we can somehow form groups of people together that decide we're going to do this or not do this, right? All of a sudden then you're empowered a little bit more to make progress. And again, I think schools, churches, and local communities are ways to try that. There's also groups that are forming called Postman Pledge groups, Okay? And if you know anything about philosophy of technology, that's a nod to Neil Postman, not the mailman. Okay? Neil Postman, amusing ourselves to death, technopoly. Okay? He was one of the big thinkers that in media ecology it's called, that really helped a lot of people understand the impacts of technology on ourselves, on what we think of what it means to be human, and so forth. So Postman pledge groups basically are parents that get together and say, hey, these are the rules we're going to have with our kids with devices, and in place of those devices, we're going to go to park and have picnics. We're going to have phoneless feasts. We're going to do dances, right? We're going to do all these things that require embodied participation as a person with each other. Right? So I think that's a good one as well, collective action. So his 3 best practices: phone-free schools, full stop, more recess and unstructured play, and collective action. Okay, I'll stop there real quick. Questions, pushback, anything that's just like a burning question in relation to what I talked about so far, real quick. Yeah.
Would it be fair to include all kinds of screen media in this single cell phone conversation? For example, my dad born in 1969, grew up in the 70s, 80s. Kids were outside, bicycles and stuff. Now you go outside and done their conditioning, and I think that's, that's the sound machine. You go outside, you hear your conditioning warning, no sound, no people, cars maybe,
Yeah.
and especially residential neighborhoods in cities. But there's no children or anyone playing. It's fair to include all types of screen media. So no phones in the classroom, sure, we get iPads, and you take those away, or replace that with something else. Digital media in general, how far does that phone category extend?
That's a great question. So I think there's 2 aspects. In relation to the classroom, I would say in general, digital mediated learning is not as good as just sort of old-fashioned learning, okay? And the data there is accumulating as well. So any type of screen. If we're using a screen to mediate the learning process, we're losing out on something. Even note-taking, right? There's studies on note-taking. You take notes by hand, you remember more than you do if you type the notes, right? So there's a lot there in relation to minimizing screens in the classroom, especially for younger ages. So that will go beyond that. But they're also, just in general, the phone is different, right? What will you tell me? What's different about the phone?
Well, I was born in 2001. Now, I remember back in 2004, last mail order catalog, and then everybody started texting after that. That's old age.
Does the phone go with you?
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah.
The thing follows me everywhere. It's in my
Right.
car, it's next to my body, it's next to my heart, literally. It's in my right hand all the time.
Right.
Revelation, maybe.
No, I think that's another big difference, right? The phone goes with you, whereas the computer stays put at a place in the house, okay? And I think that's another helpful just tip in general. If we approach the technology as a tool for a specific use that we're using it for, that is better than really living through the phone or the device, where it becomes the lens through which you see the world, right? It becomes a reality-mediating mechanism, is what I like to call it. You're not really experiencing reality. You're having it mediated to you through these screen-based devices, right? Yeah.
It's just an observation. When cell phones became quite popular, more and more people were having them. I noticed people apologizing for not taking the phone call right away. Sorry, I missed your call to explain. And even now, they go into explanation. And I always stop them. I said, why are you apologizing? I really don't expect you, right, for you to be at my beck and call.
Yeah, that's right. That's changed a lot in relation to what the workplace expected of people as well, right? Where it's expected that you're always going to pick up the phone, right? Because it's always going with you. And in many ways, it trains us to not focus on the people that are right around us, and instead focus on the person that's somewhere else. Again, mediated to us through the device, instead of the embodied people right around us.
You made the comment that the media kind of takes the friction away, but I would argue that it just creates an unhealthy friction, whereas the personal interactions is one of the healthy interactions. Because, there still is that friction of social bullying,
Oh, yeah.
chance my call. So
Sure.
it's a different set of friction.
Trade-offs. Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't think it's-
Fair enough. Fair enough. There are types of friction through any type of mediated communication or interaction with other people through a screen. Yeah. there are different types of friction. But yeah, I think, like you said, the ones that we experience through embodied human action or interaction are the ones we're designed to deal with. Yes, sir.
But there's a spiritual problem here as well, because, you know, if you have there's a spiritual problem with an addiction at the heart of it. Addiction is a kind of slavery.
Yeah.
Somebody on a podcast I listened to defined it as the church of the infinitely fractured, splendidly alone together.
Yeah.
So the sacramental elements there are dopamine and blue light.
Yep.
How do you preach them out of that and toward what?
No, it's a huge challenge, and I think that's why we need to have experiences and communities that are pushing back against this so they can get a taste for what human-to-human interaction is like, right? Dances, picnics, right? Meals with no phones. Those types of things, we need to design the experiences to get those things out of the way so that then they can realize, oh, this other thing is actually better, even if there are frictions that are different. Right? And that's a challenge, don't get me wrong, and I'm not cracked the code on that one. But I do think we at least need to try. Right? Yeah. Okay, great comments and contributions, I appreciate it. All right, let's keep moving here. So part two, keeping the classroom humane. First, just a few assessment suggestions, then we'll talk about curricular suggestions, and then classic texts that engage with technological questions. First off, just a couple examples why this is very important. If you don't think that your students are experimenting with ChatGPT, you're just being naive. Okay. I had 6 students last year in my high school senior class with classical conversations, okay? And almost every week, we had some little side conversation about ChatGPT or an AI generator, okay? And I think that one of my students was using it on some of their assignments, okay? But you know what? It's extremely hard to prove because you can't just Google their text that they used in their paper and find it, right? Like you used to be able to do that, okay? If all of a sudden in a paper, you know, their voice changed and their vocabulary changed and all the rest, oh, geez, let me just Google this sentence. Oh, there it is, Wikipedia, right, or wherever else. It's like, hey, here, you cheated, do this again, right? With large language models, the text is generated for them, okay? And then it's not searchable, it's not archived on the internet. So if you find a sentence in the paper or the paragraph in the paper or the whole paper that you think has been plagiarized through ChatGPT, you're going to have a hard time proving that because you cannot produce the quote by searching online. Does that make sense? Okay. Now there are some technologies that are using, this is where it gets really messy, using AI to determine if AI is used in the writing of papers. Okay. And years ago, I used to go to Reformed Theological Seminary in Charlotte, and I worked there as well in their, quote, virtual campus. And stayed connected with one of their sort of leaders in their IT field. And he was telling me recently that in all their meetings for their different campuses, this is one of the main conversations they're having with professors. Okay, what do we do about this? And they're struggling as well. I mean, it's here. Okay, it's not coming, it's here. And it's going to get harder and harder to detect. I had some other quotes from articles and college professors about proving that it's here already, but I'm not going to belabor that point. Let's just move on. So what do we do about that? First off, I would say, you know, this is where the classical method is great because we've got like old-fashioned methods of assessment. Right? We have things like oral exams. Right? We have things like what I used to call my class a colloquium, where I'd have 3 students come up to the front and they'd sit in the front based on a prepared text that they have read. And then I would ask questions to them, right? The rest of the class would be here. And then 3 more would come up for a different assigned text, and I would ask questions to them. That was an authentic assessment, right? There was some risk there, and there was no way AI could do that, right? I think also this is where, you know, writing in class with pen and paper, right? I used to teach AP US history, and one of the things I did like about that, besides the ideological stuff in the curriculum, was the fact that even the AP exam was handwritten, timed essays, okay? So in other words, they had to generate intelligent, articulate material in class or in the time of the exam, right, with nothing. No computer, no phone, no nothing, okay? So I think this is where we can go back to some older methods of assessment, which again are there in our heritage, which are basically bot-proof, okay? Those are AI-proof. There's no way to fake that, right? When you're in front of the classroom, when you're having a one-on-one conversation with the teacher, right? Those types of things. I think we're going to have to sort of figure out how to do that, or refigure out how to do that. Now I know, you probably realize there's a computer back here. So mea culpa, okay? I usually don't use a computer when I'm presenting in normal settings, but I didn't have access to a printer to print out my actual tests. So, all right, you can say I'm a hypocrite later. But I do just have a few quotes here I was looking for. Let's see here, in relation to assessment, if I missed anything. Let's see, we talked about the fact that this is already a problem. Oh, I'll just give one example. So there's an academic journal called Surfaces and Interfaces, okay? And in March 2024, volume 46 of their publication started with an abstract like this, or introduction like this. Certainly, here is a possible introduction for your topic. Lithium metal batteries are promising candidates for high energy density rechargeable batteries due to their low electrical potentials and high theoretical capacities. Okay, if you've ever experimented with ChatGPT, you know exactly what that is. Okay, that's a response to a human prompt to summarize material. Okay, now that was published in an academic journal. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, it means probably what happened is you submit a draft, right? It's peer reviewed, and they say, hey, you need to put an introduction on this, and then it's like, okay, I'll do that. So what did the authors do? They asked ChatGPT to put an introduction to the thing, and they didn't even care enough or look at it close enough to realize that all they did was copy and paste, and oopsies, I forgot to get rid of that beginning of the prompt there, right? And then when it went back through peer review, it just was checkbox, checkbox. We'll get this thing in, right? And again, that's not just a high schooler messing with ChatGPT. Okay, that's an academic, professor somewhere. Who's doing so? All right, so it is a problem already. So those are some brief assessment suggestions. I will also say that even in classical education, it is easy to start to think of students as quantifiable and teaching as a technique. Okay, and those things are also in some ways mechanistic ways of thinking. Okay. I mean, what does it mean to say that you got a 93 in U.S. history? Can I really, quantify that student with a 93? I mean, it's a bigger question about numerical grading and all the rest, but I do think, again, it's important to take a step back. What are we really doing in using numbers, okay, to grade and so forth? We're essentially trying to quantify something in a way that is really beyond quantification if the goal is human formation. Right? Again, that's just food for thought. I'm not saying we shouldn't grade. I'm saying we need to be careful that we don't do so in a mechanistic way, right, that reduces students to a number. And in the same way, teaching, while techniques are important, right, teaching cannot be reduced to a technique. There's a great book by Jacques Ellul from 1954 called The Technological Society. And he argues that basically the bigger problem is the technological devices. It's the way of thinking that we imbibe because of the technological devices. Okay? That we come to view the world through the lens of technique. That everything is a technique that we can sort of master and execute to fulfill the needs that we want. Okay? Another way to put it would be that it's not that our machines become more human, it's that we humans become more like machines. The machine template becomes the template for everything else. Okay, that's Ellul's argument. And I think there is, again, just sort of a risk in education that we begin to look at everything sort of as a technique rather than as a very inefficient process, right? That requires a lot of give and take and a lot of time and effort So those are some other things when we think about teaching, learning, and assessment. All right, let's go on to curricular suggestions. First, don't just teach how to use technology, also teach how it uses us. In other words, I think the curriculum should include some form of history of technology or questions regarding the development of technology. Students need technology education, not in the sense of, learning the skills per se, for two reasons. One, they usually know how to do it better than we do. And second, we can't really predict what the exact skills will be when they get to their careers anyway. But what we can do is give them a framework for thinking about technology. So Neil Postman put it this way. We should make technology itself an object of inquiry so that students are more interested in asking questions about the computer than in getting answers from it. Okay? And I think that's even more relevant with AI. So in other words, we should sort of push our students to be more interested in asking questions about ChatGPT than in getting answers from it. Does that make sense? Okay? So in other words, the technology itself becomes an object of inquiry, to interrogate, to consider philosophically, theologically, and so forth. Okay? Now, this does not have to be a course. This can take place in any course. I think history is especially perfect for this because you can do what we just did with the car, right? We just did a very brief history of technology in relation to the car, right, and how that impacted society. So this does not have to be a separate course. This can be incorporated into the existing courses you already have. The car is a great example. The clock is another great example, right? How did the clock impact history? Right? There's whole books written about that. And to summarize them, basically, some have argued that the mechanical clock is the invention of the industrial age. Okay? It's what made the rest of the things possible. And really changed the way we think about time in a lot of ways. Okay? So the clock, the car, you could do this with all sorts of things in other courses. Or you could even get, take a whopper like this. The development of transhumanism as distorted Christian eschatology. Okay? That would be a fascinating sort of maybe upper level high school discussion to take a few days and think about transhumanism, the idea that we can transcend our bodies technologically, right? To live forever or whatever it might be, right? And how that's really a distortion of Christian eschatology. That would be fascinating, right? So those are just a few examples of how you could incorporate this into existing courses. And let's see here. Math and science, I think in math and science, this would be the field maybe to get into how these things actually work, right? How does AI, how do large language models work and so forth. That would be a good field for that. And then I think philosophy and theology are perfect places, huge opportunity to really dig into these questions that maybe used to be like irrelevant to students, right? The mind-body problem, who cares about the mind-body problem? But when you got ChatGPT sitting in front of you, the mind-body problem all of a sudden becomes a lot more relevant, right? So there's a lot there. We can just sort of tweak what we're already doing in courses to address more of these questions that are very pressing in students' minds. So those are just a few curricular suggestions. Let's see if I had any others here real quick. Yeah, I did have another one. All right. Teach information literacy. I think this is another one. Okay. How do we become information literate? In other words, how do we know what's a reliable source? Okay. We may need to take time to do that in this environment we're in. Okay. What do you know? How do you know if a website is reliable? What steps would you perform when conducting due diligence on an information claim? What alternative search engines are most suited for standard questions, which are best for academic inquiries? Those are the types of questions that we should be asking and encouraging our students to struggle with, right? When you're doing research, you got to do more than just Google something, right? You have to have ways to determine the sources that you're getting, whether they're reliable or not. Let's see here what else I've got as far as curricular suggestions. I think that's it. All right, so now let's go to classic texts. Existing texts that already may be in your curriculum that deal with these technological and human questions. First off, if we start with the ancient classics, I think we could say that there are several Greek myths that deal with technological questions. I think one of the primary ones is Prometheus. What does Prometheus do?
fire.
It was fire from the gods, right? And what does that enable him to do? Well, it's really sort of a technological accomplishment, right? It allows him to create the forge, right? And iron implements and so forth. That's really a technological grasping that's occurring there in the stealing of fire. And there's also a brother of Prometheus. Anybody know? Epimetheus, right? And usually the way the myth is told, he's sort of like the dim-witted brother, right? But there are some who interpret this actually as Epimetheus as the one who's really remaining human. Because what does he do? He marries Pandora. Okay. And this is, again, it's sort of a fascinating twist when you dig a little bit more into the story of Prometheus and the stealing of fire, then you have this sort of subversion story going on with Epimetheus. Yes, Prometheus thinks he's an idiot for doing that, but actually in the marriage of Epimetheus and Pandora, you have sort of this embrace of limitation, of hope, of family, because what was left in Pandora's box? Hope, right? Now, again, there's different interpretations of how to understand it, Epimetheus, but I think it is at least interesting to bring that discussion to the fore in a classroom, especially when such technological questions are all around us. Okay, so Prometheus and Epimetheus, great example. I think you could also say Pygmalion, right? What happened with Pygmalion?
Makes him a statue.
Yeah, he sort of fashioned something for him to love with his own hands, right? Which again can relate in some ways at least to these questions of technology. There are aspects of the Odyssey as well that I think relate to this question. Some of Odysseus' temptations are to transcend his human limitations, okay? To embrace sort of immortality with one of the goddesses, okay? But what does he choose? Eventually, amidst several failings, he chooses to return to Penelope, right? Somebody who's going to die. He's going to die. He embraces risk and love instead of ease and comfort with goddesses, right? So those types of things, again, they're already there. We can pick up a little bit on the technological side of those questions. I think Scripture as well has a lot of technological themes that we could tap into. The story of the Tower of Babel certainly is a technological story. The line of Cain, if you read the early chapters of Genesis in the primeval history, you have the line of Cain developing all these technologies. And in general, the city in the Old Testament is a place of evil, where the center of the city is the worship of the pagan god. Right? Now God speaks into that, right? Creates Zion, but at the center of Zion you have the temple, right? The worship of the true God. But there's this technological thread weaving through the scriptures, right? Which culminates in the New Jerusalem, a city, which is a technology, okay? A redeemed technology, right? Where gold finds its destiny in crowns, right? Where diamonds find their destiny in crowns, and so forth. There's just all of this technological stuff, if you will, going on in the scriptures that we could pull out. Christ himself is called a tecton, okay? Craftsman. So there you have the same sort of Greek roots that we have for technology applied to Christ, the craftsman. So there's things in the scriptures, there's things in Greek myths. There are a lot of short stories. There's a lot of dystopias that we could look at. I'll throw out a few here, shotgun style. I forgot a big one. Plato's Cave. Duh. I mean, my goodness, you've got Plato's Cave where you have people sort of looking at the shadows when reality's out there. I mean, just replace the cave with a device, right? You got people living through their devices instead of living in reality, right? That's another great example. You have, let me just pull up a quote here from Plato's Phaedrus. This is where we get the story in relation to writing. O king, said, I apologize for my pronunciations. O king, said the youth, this will make the Egyptians wiser and give them better memories. It is a specific both for the memory and for the wit. Themis replied, O most ingenious Theus, the parent or inventor of an art is not always the best judge of its utility or inutility of his own inventions to the users of them. And in this instance, you who are the father of letters, from a paternal love of your own children, have been led to attribute to them a quality which they cannot have. For this discovery of yours will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls, because they will not use their memories. They will trust the external written characters and not remember themselves. The specific which you have discovered is an aid not to memory, but to reminiscence. And you give your disciples not truth, but only the semblance of truth. They will be hearers of many things and will have learned nothing. They will appear to be omniscient and will generally know nothing. They will be tiresome company, having the show of wisdom without the reality. Okay? So there's a great example of a classic source. That's Plato, the Phaedrus dialogue. And what's he talking about there?
Right.
Yeah, the development of writing, what it's going to do to human memory. It's going to atrophy human memory. Okay? So there's stuff like this in the classics that we can tap into to help our students navigate these difficult technological dilemmas. I'll give you an example from a short story. 1907, E.M. Forster, 1909, excuse me, E.M. Forster wrote a little short story. It's about 20 pages. It's called The Machine Stops. The Machine Stops. It is like a prophecy of the current world we live in technologically. I'll read you a quote from E.M. Forster's The Machine Stops, 1909. So just to give you context, that's before World War I, okay? Orville, the Wright brothers had just done their first flight, okay? The assembly line is all the rage. And he writes a book called The Machine Stops. And in this book, he envisions human beings that no longer live on the surface of the earth. Instead, they live underground with a machine network that provides air, food, water, entertainment, and all their needs at the push of a button. People in Forster's stories have come to hate in-person presence and touch while enjoying the illusion of community through a vast interconnected web of what he called gramophones. Through this web of gramophones, people become addicted to receiving and transmitting information, including proto-social media posts he called ideas. They even use a type of AI as they listen to lectures on the sea that are compiled out of other lectures that had already been delivered on the same subject. And that line there is a quote about other lectures that had already been delivered on the same subject from the book. All right, so here's the quote I was going to read. Quote, "We created the machine to do our will, but we cannot make it do our own will now. It has robbed us of the sense of space and of the sense of touch. It has blurred every human relation and narrowed down to love a carnal act. It has paralyzed our bodies and our wills, and now it compels us to worship it. The machine develops, but not on our own lines. The machine proceeds, but not to our goal. We only exist as the blood corpuscles that course through its arteries. And if it could work without us, it would let us die." 1909. Now that's a 20-page short story. Your kids could read that in 1 hour in class or at home, and you could discuss it the next day. Not a big change to the curriculum, but very relevant for dealing with these questions. It leads to a lot of good discussions. I'm just going to hold a few more up here. A lot of dystopias, Fahrenheit 451, great example of these things. There's lots of quotes you could use from there. Frankenstein, which was also called the modern Prometheus. Okay, there you have a nod right there from Mary Shelley to these types of questions. It's not a horror story. It's really a story of technological grasping for making life with your own hands. And then the effects of that when it comes to alienation and loneliness. Another great example, 1984, Brave New World. I think actually of those two, Brave New World is more relevant on the technological questions. I'm just going to read one little thing in closing from Brave New World, and then we'll take questions. So in Brave New World, there's this figure named John the Savage, okay, and he is one of the few remaining, he might actually be the only remaining human who's born from a natural mother, okay. And there's a world controller, Mustafa Mon. Great name for a world controller. Mustafa Mon, right? And towards the end of the book, there's an interaction between the two, sort of a confrontation. And if you know anything about the book, this world system is basically controlling people through comfort and ease. What's the drug? Soma, right? Soma. Which, again, I think is a very easy parallel to these addictive devices that pleasure jolts, right? But John is holding out on these things. He's not taking Soma. He's not participating in the world system. But he confronts Mustafa Mon towards the end. I'm just going to read the dialogue. John says, "But I like inconveniences. We don't, said the controller. We prefer to do things comfortably. John says, but I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Ahmad, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. All right then, said the savage defiantly. I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. Not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. The savage at last said, I claim them all. Mustafa Ahmad shrugged his shoulders and said, you're welcome. What a launching off point for a discussion of technological questions and what it means to be human. Right? Maybe in a text that you're already using. That's the type of stuff that's there in our tradition already. Okay. So in conclusion, then we'll take questions. The great farmer poet Wendell Berry wrote in his 2001 book, Life is a Miracle, that it is easy for me to imagine that the next great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines. So, join me in getting outside the machine and throwing sand in its gears and living as creatures and human beings fully alive. Thank you.
So I've got a nephew that is a computer engineer
Yeah.
in Berkeley right now. Curious of what questions would you ask him? Like, you go back. I don't think anything wrong with a car mechanic.
Yeah.
But a long time ago, you probably a web designer or internet.
Oh, great question. Okay, this is good qualification. I think I know where you're going. Yeah.
Cell phone, kind of same thing.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
apps.
Right.
So where is that? Like we want good, solid Christian people.
We do.
in the area.
Yeah.
Um,
Knowing how to use these technologies, design these technologies in a way that leads to human flourishing, not human destruction.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, just speak to that a little bit. And maybe where do you see? I don't know what's the next future.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important clarification. I'm not saying these are bad professions or, again, that the technology is bad. I'm saying we need to realize it's not neutral, right? There's nudging us in certain directions. And many times it is the engineers and designers that realize this the most, right? That these things are not neutral. So yeah, I have no problem at all with Christians getting into these professions and fulfilling their vocations in a God-honoring way to help us navigate all this. And that's much better than handing it over to people that don't have the same priorities we do. Yeah, so that's my short answer there. It's a good question. Yeah, other questions? Yeah.
Just more comment. I am pushing myself to use AI more. I'm finding I'm using the Perplexity app more than ChatGPT. It's very useful. What I'm finding I'm using it for is it's a lot easier than a search engine. It just presents the results of the first 3 or 4 pages of the search engine for you in a simple narrative form. So time-wise, it's just very efficient. Now, what I'm hearing from friends that work in the corporate world, and I work for the military, and we're not using it too much yet, they say it's coming, is that there are top corporate management people are training their people on using AI. So this is going to be happening at the corporate world. I think increasingly people are going to be unable to avoid using AI in these circumstances. I don't see it replacing people. What I do think, though, I'm finding is it's sharpening my thinking, my acuity for how to pose questions to it. And one new field that is supposed to be exploding is the field of prompt writer. The people whose job is going to be essentially to shovel the coal into the machine of the AI by asking it well-crafted questions that elicit the useful and helpful answer. And I'm finding that really is a skill.
It is, and I'll just say this, and then we can, if you want to stick around and talk into it, we can. I don't want to keep you longer than we have to. This is why I think we need each other. We need to have these discussions, and we need to get pastors thinking about this and our best minds on this, because these are really hard questions. It's going to be hard to know if we're engaging with AI or not, and if it's done so in a way that's really dehumanizing us. Now, I will say in relation to prompt writing, if you think about that, there is something happening there that's I just struggle with, and that's the fact that what's the template? The machine is the template, okay? And we're submitting our writing to the machine template. Oh, what's a good Google query, right? How do you frame the question on Google so you get the answer you want? What are you doing? Well, you're sort of taking the machine template and using that. Computation is different than knowledge and wisdom. I think that's going to be a big thing here. There's these things called the epistemic virtues, in addition to the moral virtues and theological virtues. I think we should study the epistemic virtues, okay? And part of wisdom is embodied. The time it takes to learn something, right? Yes, it's quicker to ask AI to summarize something, but what is the trade-off? Again, these are trade-offs. Is there a place for that? Yeah, maybe. But I do think we need to think very carefully and seriously about the trade-offs that are being undertaken there when we're doing that. And in general, when we're taking shortcuts in the process of learning, we're not getting the benefit of that embodied wisdom that takes time and effort and risk, right? Dr. Nordland, you're teaching Greek right now to your students, right? And you're dealing with this question with them. Why in the world should they learn Greek when, AI can give you answers more quickly? There's something about the type of human being we're making in learning Greek, right? I don't want to make a person that can hit play to play Bach. I want to make a person that can play Bach on the piano, right? And I think there are those types of dynamics we need to think about. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. We need each other to figure out the answer to those questions. They're hard ones. Thank you for your time. If you want to talk more,